Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
When Lux opened his eyes, he found himself lying on a very soft and comfortable bed, feeling weak and unable to move. There was also a sweet fragrance in the air, and its scent made him unable to form coherent thoughts, breaking his ability to think properly. Just before he could wonder where he was, he noticed that he wasn't alone on the bed. A young lady with long purple hair was positioned in front of him, and she was currently servicing his little brother with her lips, unaware that he was already awake. At first, he thought that he was dreaming because what he was seeing seemed to be impossible. But it didn't take long for him to recognize that what he was seeing was real, and it subconsciously made his little brother react, making it awaken from its slumber. Although there was a faint purple mist in the surroundings, it was impossible for him to not recognize the guild master of Iris Guild, Henrietta. The proud and beautiful lady who led the Academy's guild, Serenity, and already had a fiancé was busy kissing, licking, and sucking his member as if it was the most delicious thing in the world. As if noticing that he was now awake, Henrietta released Lux's member from her lips, making a popping sound. The young lady with purple hair then raised her head and looked at him seductively. It was then that Lux realized that Henrietta wasn't wearing any clothes, which suddenly made his body heat up, and his breathing became ragged. Her breasts, which were usually hidden by her armor, were now laid bare for him to see, and for a moment, the thought of touching and sucking them passed through the half-elf's mind. However, unlike what happened earlier, this line of thought didn't disappear and remained inside his head. It was as if the sweet fragrance in their surroundings was encouraging this thought, fanning the desire in his chest to rise to the surface. The half-elf forcefully shook his head in order to dispel the idea that was slowly taking root in his consciousness. He knew for a fact that Henrietta was already betrothed to another, and he had no intention of stealing another man's lover. But even this newly found determination disappeared, making Lux blank out for a split second. While he was desperately trying to regain some sort of control over his thoughts and body, Henrietta suddenly kissed his lips in a passionate manner, as if the half-elf was her lover. Lux's first reaction was to push her away, but as soon as this thought emerged, it instantly disappeared, making him blank out for a second time as Henrietta continued to kiss him, invading his lips with her tongue and making his body heat up. After nearly half a minute of being kissed, Henrietta pulled back and cupped Lux's face and looked at him affectionately. "Lux, I want you," Henrietta said before kissing his lips for the second time and pressing her naked body onto him, holding him in place and preventing him from pushing her away. Somewhere inside the Passion Palace, men don't care if the one they are going to embrace is already promised to another, Queen Rhiannon whispered into Kai's ear as they both watched what was happening inside the room where Lux and Henrietta were through a projection. As long as that lady is beautiful enough, they will not hesitate to hold them and cheat on their partners. Her words were smooth as silk and gentle as a breeze, similar to a devil who was trying to tempt someone to do evil things. You can find Lux in an environment where he can't think properly and his freedom is restrained, Kai replied in a monotonous tone. Do not think that I'm naive and gullible. I can tell that Henrietta is under a charm spell and is simply following your orders. Queen Rhiannon chuckled as she wrapped her hands around Kai, hugging her from behind. What you say is indeed true, Queen Rhiannon commented as she lightly caressed the glowing mark on Kai's lower abdomen, as if it was something very precious. But you've got one thing wrong. As long as he had the willpower to break free from the enchantment I placed, he would be able to push her away. The fact that he is unable to do that proves that he is also enjoying that young lady's embrace. Kai didn't reply and simply watched the projection in silence. What Queen Rhiannon didn't tell her was that when Lux was still unconscious, she made him drink a strong aphrodisiac that would slowly take effect a few minutes after he regained consciousness. It also had the ability to make him feel weak and incapable of using his powers for a few hours. The sweet fragrance that was preventing Lux from thinking properly and forming coherent thoughts came from the 4 incense burners that were located in the 4 corners of the room. The scent was coming from a powdery substance that came from a carnivorous abyssal flower, exclusive to the 13th layer of the abyss. This flower had the ability to befuddle anyone who smelled its fragrance, robbing them of their strength and thoughts. This fragrance also creates illusions, making them see the person they desire. The carnivorous plants would then take this opportunity to wrap their vines around their victims, as if they were giving them a passionate hug. Slowly but surely, they would tighten their grip, injecting a paralyzing venom to their victim, rendering them helpless. But their victims wouldn't feel any pain, only the ecstasy of being embraced by the person they loved. They didn't even know that they were about to be swallowed by a carnivorous flower, which had gained the name Lover's Bloom. With this deadly combination, the half-elf was rendered helpless and only able to passively accept the one-sided passionate kisses that Henrietta was giving him, who was currently under Queen Rhiannon's charm spell. "That young lady is still a chaste maiden," Queen Rhiannon once again whispered in Kai's ears. "If your fiancé is really a man of character, he would definitely push her away. Now watch closely. I will let you see that all men are the same. They only treat us as their playthings, and throw us away when they see someone better." As soon as Queen Rhiannon finished talking, Henrietta stopped kissing Lux and sat on his waist. The half-elf's face was now flushed, and his body was feeling so hot, it felt like burning. The aphrodisiac that Queen Rhiannon had secretly made him drink was now starting to take effect, making his breathing ragged and his member as hard as a rock. An alluring smile appeared on Henrietta's lips as her soft and delicate hand held the throbbing shaft that would soon pierce her maidenhood and take her chastity away. Lux watched with bloodshot eyes as the purple-haired beauty rubbed the tip of his member at the entrance of her cave, which was now parted, wet, and slick with desire. All Henrietta needed to do was lower her waist, and the deed would be done. Kai, who was watching this scene, subconsciously clenched her fist as her eyes glowed purple. Queen Rhiannon, who was hugging her from behind, smiled sweetly as she commanded Henrietta to lower her hips and offer her virginity to Kai's fiancé, which would allow the succubus queen to corrupt the high priestess' virtuous heart. When Queen Rhiannon ordered Henrietta to lower her hips and offer her chastity to Lux, a single tear fell down her eyes. However, she still obeyed the succubus queen's command like a puppet that was being manipulated by strings. However, at that exact moment, Lux's hands held her shoulder and gave her a push. A moment later, Henrietta stared blankly at the half-elf who was pinning her down on the bed. Their position was a bit awkward because the purple-haired beauty was lying down with her legs spread wide, and Lux's member was pressing on her lower abdomen, like a hot rod of iron that was about to brand her body with his mark. Lux was panting for breath, as if he had just run a marathon at full speed without stopping. The succubus queen who was watching the projection frowned. She didn't expect that Lux would really be able to muster enough strength and willpower to push Henrietta away under the influence of the aphrodisiac and the incense that was befuddling his senses. Before she could command Henrietta to overpower the half-elf, Lux's soft and raspy words reached her ears. "Henrietta, treasure yourself a bit more," Lux said while panting for breath. "Don't allow others to control your destiny. Fight it. Someone is waiting for you back in Solais." Henrietta didn't reply and simply wrapped her legs around Lux's waist, binding him to her. She then raised her hands and placed them behind Lux's head, pulling him to her. A moment later, she once again kissed the half-elf passionately. Lux had expanded almost all of his strength and willpower to push Henrietta away before she lowered her body. Because of this, he was unable to muster enough strength right away to break free, allowing the purple-haired beauty to lock him in place. "It's no use," Queen Rhiannon laughed as she watched the projection from her room. "Although you managed to break free for a while, the end result will still be the same. If one isn't enough, I'll send another to you." Suddenly, the door of the room where Lux and Henrietta were currently locked in a passionate embrace opened. A naked, beautiful lady, who seemed to be in her late 20s, walked towards Lux and Henrietta with steady steps. The half-elf, who had sensed the arrival of the newcomer, raised his head to see who it was. A second later, he drew in a deep breath because another familiar figure had appeared in front of him. It was none other than Alicia, whom the succubus queen had also captured. Similar to Henrietta, she was also under Queen Rhiannon's charm spell and followed her orders like a puppet. The moment the mature beauty's hand cupped Lux's face, the half-elf's body shuddered uncontrollably as if he had been electrocuted. He then immediately broke free from Henrietta's hold and backed away until his back hit the wall. Queen Rhiannon's body stiffened after seeing this scene, unable to understand how the half-elf managed to regain his strength and senses the moment Alicia entered the room. What the succubus queen didn't know was that she had accidentally helped Lux overcome the dirty tricks that she had employed the moment she sent Alicia inside the room. At that moment, a monotonous laugh escaped Kai's lips as if she found this situation very funny. She remembered that one time when she, Lux, and Iris were doing pillow talk after the three of them finished making love to each other. Out of curiosity, Kai asked Lux a silly question. Her question was, if you were the only man remaining in the world, and there was also one woman remaining in the world, who is the one person that you least want to be your lifelong partner in a world where only the two of you existed? Kai thought that it would take a while for Lux to answer this question, but to her surprise, the half-elf answered her question in a heartbeat. Alicia. That was Lux's answer to his question. If there was one person that Lux didn't want to become his lifelong partner in the world, that would be none other than the lady that Queen Rhiannon had sent to make Lux and Kai fall together in her clutches. Out of all the women in the world, Lux dared not to touch Alicia the most because he knew of her undying love for his stepfather, Alexander. Also, the half-elf had a feeling that even if the headmaster of Barbados Academy didn't show it on his face, he believed that he was starting to develop some feelings for Alicia. This was evident when Lux saw how distressed he was when Iris, Alicia, and Henrietta were captured by the succubus queen. Lux was also one of the people who supported Alicia's love for his stepfather, and he of all people didn't want to lay his hands on the mature beauty, whose eyes would always turn affectionate whenever she stared at Alexander's back. Bone prison, Lux shouted, and a prison made of bones locked up the two ladies, preventing them from coming close to him. After casting this spell, he lost the strength in his legs, causing him to collapse on the ground. His powers were still restricted, and he was only able to cast the spell due to his strong resolve to not touch his stepfather's woman, which allowed him to momentarily break free from the things that were taking hold of his body. Kai, who was watching the projection, finally stopped laughing before facing the succubus queen with a smug smile on his face. "It looks like your plan backfired," Kai said in the same monotonous tone. "You think this is very funny?" Queen Rhiannon scoffed. "Fine. Let's see how long he will last." The succubus queen smirked before turning into a purple mist that flew towards Kai's forehead, merging with her body. When the purple smoke was nowhere to be seen, a tattoo that resembled a third eye appeared on Kai's head. "Playtime's over," Kai said with a devilish smile on her face. "I'll show you that all men are the same." She then waved her hand, and Lux disappeared from his room and reappeared to where Kai was currently at. The half-elf, who was still in a weakened state, looked at his fiancée, who was walking towards him with a sweet smile on her face. He could tell that the young beauty that was moving towards him was indeed his fiancée, but there was something different about her that made Lux raise his guard. "I may not know a lot of things about you, but I know your weakness," Kai said as the tattoo on her forehead glowed purple. "Silly boy, of all the weaknesses in the world, why did you have such a stupid weakness?" Lux glared at the young beauty in front of him because he realized that his fiancée was being possessed by someone. "Get away from her, Queen Rhiannon," Lux said as he tried to prop himself up from the ground. "Leave Kai alone." Kai giggled before resting her hand on Lux's head, who was glaring at her. "I like that look of defiance in your eyes," Queen Rhiannon, who had possessed Kai's body, said in a teasing tone. "Let's see how long it lasts." A moment later, Lux found himself lying on the bed, with his face buried in Kai's thighs. While this was happening, the young lady kissed and licked the half-elf's throbbing member before putting it inside her mouth. She had vowed to herself that she would punish the half-elf for the things that he had done to her. Now that he was her captive, she would not stop until she had wrung him dry, using the body of his beloved Kai. "Please forgive me. After all of the things you've done to me, keep dreaming. Pa, pa, pa. I beg you, please stop." I'll only stop when your brain turns to mush. Pa, pa, pa. I can't go on. Have mercy. The only mercy you will get from me is a 2-minute break. Now move that hip. Pa, pa, pa. Kai's body shuddered in both pain and pleasure as Lux released his seed inside her for the umpteenth time. She helplessly collapsed on top of the half-elf as she panted for breath. I'll kill you for this, Queen Rhiannon said, still possessing Kai's body. I swear, I'll kill you. Go ahead, Lux whispered in her ears as he patted her head. We will start round XX in 2 minutes. Kai's body trembled as the thought of making love with the devilish half-elf for the umpteenth time appeared in her mind. The succubus queen couldn't accept what was happening. Nothing was going according to her plan. At the start, she had full control of the situation, but everything changed the moment the half-elf filled Kai's womb with his seed for the first time. How did this happen? Queen Rhiannon sighed internally as the half-elf's member slowly regained its vigor inside Kai's cave, which was now overflowing with his essence. How did they do this to me? The succubus queen had many questions, but no answers came. 2 minutes later, Lux's hands held her backside and moved it up and down. Now that Kai had downgraded into an ordinary mortal, the half-elf could easily lift her body with ease, even if she didn't do anything. A few minutes later, Queen Rhiannon cried out for the umpteenth time as she was once again filled to the brim with Lux's essence. A moment later, she fell on his chest and lost consciousness as the emblem on Kai's lower abdomen glowed with golden light. 6 hours ago, lewd sounds reverberated inside the room as Queen Rhiannon, who was possessing Kai's body, enjoyed sucking Lux's member using her soft and seductive lips. As the succubus queen, she had many ways to fan a man's flames of lust, making them release their essence nonstop until they were wrung dry. She had long decided to make Lux suffer even if he begged for forgiveness and mercy. The thought of drinking the last drop of his seed until the half-elf lost his consciousness flipped the switch of her sadistic nature, making her more eager to use her techniques to make Lux and Kai fall into depravity. After a few minutes of preparing Lux's throbbing shaft for the deed, Queen Rhiannon gave it one last kiss before changing her position to sit on the half-elf's waist. She gazed victoriously at the half-elf, whose face was in a daze after being buried in Kai's thighs, which was his weakness. Queen Rhiannon had a special ability that was similar to a third eye. With this ability, she was able to see the weakness of all men, allowing her to use this information to her advantage. The succubus queen then cupped Lux's face and lowered her head to give him a long and passionate kiss. When the kiss ended, she stared at his eyes and used her charm, Epic, which would put the half-elf under her control. Originally, Lux had a very strong resistance against charm skills, making him nearly immune to them. However, after being exposed to his weakness for several minutes, his resistance had considerably lowered. Don't resist, Queen Rhiannon, who was possessing Kai, said affectionately as her eyes glowed purple. It will be over soon. Lux still did his best to resist, but his body was weakened by the effects of the incense, aphrodisiac, and his fiancée's thighs, so his senses were inevitably conquered by Queen Rhiannon's charm skill. His eyes also turned purple, and with it, his body became lax. Seeing that she had managed to put the half-elf under her control, the succubus queen giggled because she knew that she had already won. Make love to me as passionate as you can, Queen Rhiannon ordered. Yes, your majesty, Lux replied in a monotonous tone. Queen Rhiannon smiled as she stood up and laid down on the bed. The half-elf then moved to kiss her passionately, intertwining his tongue with hers. His hands then moved to grope her breasts in a gentle yet firm way, just like the way he made love to Iris and Kai whenever they were together. When their kiss ended, the half-elf continued to shower her with kisses, moving downwards. He kissed her neck collarbone until he reached her breasts, which he kissed lovingly before sucking them inside of his mouth. How innocent, Queen Rhiannon said as he wrapped her arms around Lux's head, pulling his head closer. You still have much to learn, Lux. I'll give you a 4 out of 10 for your effort. The half-elf didn't reply because he was busy nibbling and sucking the nipple inside his mouth to talk. After a few minutes had passed, he once again kissed his fiancée lovingly and moved ever so slowly downwards. When he finally reached her cave, which was already wet with anticipation, he licked it lovingly before inserting his tongue inside it, savoring its flavor which he hadn't tasted for several weeks ever since he left for Agartha. A sigh escaped Queen Rhiannon's lips as Lux did his best to make her feel good. It had been nearly 2 decades since she had made love to someone, so having a young man who was still inexperienced in the true art of lovemaking made her quite eager to ravage him. His member's girth and size are perfect, as if he was born to make love to me, Queen Rhiannon thought as he lightly tapped Lux's head, making the latter raise her head to look at her. "Do it," Queen Rhiannon ordered, as she spread her legs wider. "Make love to me." "Yes, Your Majesty," Lux replied in the same monotonous tone as earlier and rubbed the tip of his shaft at her entrance, coating it with her love juices. Queen Rhiannon wrapped her legs around Lux's waist and pulled him closer to her, making his member penetrate deep inside her until its tip kissed the entrance of Kai's womb. "This is it," Queen Rhiannon moaned in ecstasy. "It's been so long since I had this feeling." Soon Lux started moving his hips. Queen Rhiannon moved her legs with every thrust, allowing the half-elf's every thrust to hit deeper inside of her. Over time, their lovemaking became rougher, and only the sound of their bodies hitting each other and her lustful moans reverberated inside the room. Although she didn't want to admit it, her nearly 2-decade-long abstinence had made her body crave the touch of a man. She refused to fornicate with the satyrs, as well as the other demi-human creatures in the abyss, because she didn't want them to benefit from the act of making love to her. She had learned a very painful lesson in the past, and because of that, she decided that she would be very careful in choosing who her next partner would be, and that she would only do it with someone who was under her complete control. "It's getting bigger," Queen Rhiannon thought when she felt Lux's members starting to throb inside of her. "He's going to release his seed." The succubus queen's legs that were wrapped around Lux's waist tightened their grip as she pulled him to her when she deemed that the time was right. The moment she did that, she felt something hot and very powerful gushing inside of her, making her body tremble in ecstasy as it filled up her womb. The emblem on Kai's lower abdomen glowed purple as she basked in the afterglow of her and Lux's first orgasm that scratched the itch that she had been unable to scratch for the past 2 decades. "You're indeed perfect, Lux," Queen Rhiannon said. Even after the half-elf had released his essence inside of her, his member remained hard and raring to go. With a giggle, the succubus queen once again ordered the red-headed teenager to move his hips, and with that, they started round 2. Queen Rhiannon wasn't aware that, in front of the young man who had resumed making love to her, several words of text appeared in front of him. "You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like." Within the depths of Lux's charmed eyes, something stirred for a brief moment before vanishing without a trace. Once again, only the sound of Kai's pleasurable moans and their bodies hitting each other reverberated inside the room. Queen Rhiannon wasn't aware of the changes that were happening inside Lux's body, as well as the stat points that he was absorbing from her. As a demigod, her combined stats points were over 50 million, so losing 1,000 stat points was negligible. She wouldn't notice it in normal situations, let alone in her current state, drunk at the thought of milking the half-elf dry and making him unable to defy her again. "Yes, yes, give it to me," Queen Rhiannon cried out loudly as Lux once again released his seed inside of her. "You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like." "Rougher. I don't care if you break me." "You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like." "Amazing you're still this hard." "That's it. That's the way I like it. You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. Queen Rhiannon and Lux made love over and over again without stopping even for a minute. Perhaps due to the effects of the aphrodisiac and Queen Rhiannon's techniques, Lux's member remained standing strong even after doing several rounds nonstop. With every release, the half-elf stat points increased, raising his rank little by little. Every time his seed filled up Kai's womb, the purple color that emanated from her lower abdomen slowly lost its luster. After an hour of lovemaking, a faint golden color appeared on the edges of Kai's emblem. After 2 hours had passed, the golden light slowly spread, overpowering Queen Rhiannon's spell that had put Kai under her control. This was the reason why she was able to control Kai to do whatever she wished. The succubus queen was unaware of these changes as she indulged herself in Lux's young and strong body, which was radiating with vigor and life. "We're very compatible," Queen Rhiannon said as she shook her hips in a steady rhythm. "I changed my mind. I'll make you my personal toy and not share you with my subordinates." After making love for the umpteenth time, the succubus queen decided to take the place on top and use her techniques to make herself feel good. However, an idea popped inside her head, which made her smile sweetly. If she wanted to make the half-elf feel true despair, robbing him of his consciousness wasn't the right way to do it. What she needed to do was make Lux understand true despair by making him feel helpless as she toyed with him. "It's boring when I'm the only one conscious," Queen Rhiannon smirked as she tapped Lux's finger with her forehead. "How about you enjoy this as well?" As soon as her finger touched Lux's forehead, the charm spell that she had placed on him vanished without a trace, allowing the half-elf to regain his freedom. "I will not lose to you," Lux said through gritted teeth as he endured Queen Rhiannon's carnal techniques that were forcing him to release his seed for the umpteenth time. "You won't have your way." "But I will," Queen Rhiannon replied. "Just like this." The succubus queen increased the movement of his hips, making Lux grunt. A second later, the half-elf's body shuddered as he helplessly released his essence inside of his fiancée, who was currently being possessed by the succubus queen. "Yes, that's it." Queen Rhiannon smiled sweetly as she gazed at the expression on Lux's face. That look of defiance. "I want to see how long it will last." Just as Lux was about to retort to her, several rows of text appeared in front of him, making him stop whatever he was going to say midway. "You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like." Seeing the half-elf pause, unable to say whatever he was going to say to her, the succubus queen smirked and cupped his face. "What's wrong, Lux?" "Queen Rhiannon, are you giving up?" "You wish," Lux replied. "We'll see who will have the last laugh." "Ha! You're still clinging to hope?" Queen Rhiannon sneered. "Sorry, but the one who will laugh last is none other than me." A few minutes later, "You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. Become my loyal slave, and I promise that I will make you feel good for the rest of your life. Dream on. You may have my body, but you will never have my heart. I don't need your heart. I just need your body. Take this." Ah! You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. UB*TCH. "I will not lose to you." You can still spout that nonsense? It seems that you still haven't learned your lesson. You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. Ha! Ha! I can still go on. Don't worry, I will not stop until I drain you dry. You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. Remember this. Ha! I will make you call me daddy before this is over. Is that one of your kinks? How about you start calling me mistress instead? Dream on. Suit yourself. Coo. You have absorbed 1,000 free stats points from Queen Rhiannon. Due to the effect of the progenitor class, the stat points you gain will be increased to 3,000 stat points. Feel free to allocate it anywhere you like. After 3 hours of lovemaking, Queen Rhiannon was starting to feel that something was wrong. Even after she repeatedly drained Lux of his essence, instead of getting weaker and more desperate, the half-elf seemed to become more stubborn and more defiant. As if to prove that point, the one who was moving their hips was Lux, and she was now the one on the receiving end. Since she was possessing Kai's body, which currently had the strength of a normal mortal, she could tell that she was slowly being overpowered by the half-elf, who was dominated by her earlier. Right now, Lux was pinning Queen Rhiannon on the bed as he moved his hips in a rough manner, making the succubus queen grit her teeth. Earlier, she was still feeling pleasure. However, right now, she was feeling numb down there after being pounded nonstop for several hours. Stop! Queen Rhiannon finally had enough and cupped Lux's face. Her eyes then glowed as she activated her charm spell, forcing the half-elf to obey her command. However, instead of being charmed, the half-elf only smirked and even kissed her lips, catching her by surprise. When the kiss ended, Lux whispered something in Queen Rhiannon's ears, making her eyes widen in shock. Checkmate, Lux whispered in a teasing tone. You no longer have power over us, Your Majesty. At the same time, the half-elf released his essence inside of her womb, making the succubus queen shudder. The emblem on Kai's lower abdomen glowed brightly, erasing the remains of the purple color that once suppressed its light. Suddenly, Queen Rhiannon heard a voice inside her head, which made her face turn pale in disbelief. It seems that I have won our bet, Your Majesty, Kai said in the same teasing tone, imitating her beloved fiancé, Lux. Now, it's your turn to suffer. And no, Queen Rhiannon stuttered as Lux looked down on her with a smug expression on his face. This is impossible. The half-elf didn't reply and simply kissed her once again on the lips, shutting her up as he moved his hips for the umpteenth time. He was very close to making a breakthrough to become a C ranker, and he was a fool if he let this perfect opportunity go to waste. When Queen Rhiannon opened her eyes, she found half of her body submerged in water. This is my private pool area? Queen Rhiannon thought as she scanned her surroundings, confirming her guess. Right now, she was indeed in her private pool area, and half of her body was submerged in the water that had restorative properties. Oh, the irony, Queen Rhiannon thought. The capturer is now the captured. How the tables have turned. Just as she was about to stand up, she realized that she was unable to do so because someone was holding her from behind. Turning her head to the side, she saw Lux. He slept peacefully with his arms firmly wrapped around her body, holding her in place and preventing her from breaking free. Queen Rhiannon frowned, but after trying a few times, she realized that there was no way for her to escape the half-elf's grasp, even though he was currently asleep. Right now, she was in Kai's body, whose strength was only equal to that of an ordinary teenage girl. There was no way that someone like her could break free from the hold of a ranker whose stats were way higher than hers. Left with no choice, the succubus queen assessed her current situation and started thinking of a way to escape her predicament. She had already tried to get out of Kai's body multiple times, but something was preventing her from doing it. If only she could materialize her true form, she could easily deal with the half-elf, who had ravaged the body she was possessing, therefore ravaging her as well. But since she couldn't do that, she decided to punish the half-elf with the only thing she could think of at that moment, and that was to crush his member with her hands. You bastard! Even if I only have the strength of a mortal, I'm going to make you pay dearly for your insolence. Queen Rhiannon thought as her hands moved behind her body, grasping the hot shaft that was pressed against her backside. Even though Lux was asleep, his member was still as hard as a rock, due to the succubus queen's aphrodisiac. The only reason why he stopped making love to Kai to increase his rank was due to the fact that his fiancée's body was that of an ordinary girl, and continuously making love with her wasn't a good idea. Kai's little sister was swollen after 6 hours of continuous lovemaking, so Lux decided to take a break and allow her body to fully recover. He fell asleep not long after soaking in the recovery pool because he was also exhausted both physically, mentally, and emotionally. Just as Queen Rhiannon was about to give Lux's little brother a squeeze, the half-elf's eyes opened. "Give it up," Lux said before raising the young lady's hips and thrusting his member inside of her, making Queen Rhiannon gasp in shock. "If you don't want to rest, then we will continue with round XX. Are you sure you want that?" Queen Rhiannon's body shuddered out of fear because she didn't want to experience that feeling of helplessness ever again. It reminded her of the time when she was still weak and had no choice but to do anything in her power to survive the cruel abyssal world. If not for the fact that the golem of destruction, Antero, had become her guardian and provided her with a place that she could call home, she might have already become a plaything of one of the abyssal nobles that ruled the abyss. Seeing that the young lady in his arms stopped moving, Lux pulled her to him, allowing her to lean her body on his strong chest. A few minutes of silence passed between them before Queen Rhiannon broke the silence. "You and Kai won," Queen Rhiannon stated. "What must I do for you to release me?" "If we release you, I'm pretty sure that we will regret it," Lux replied. "The moment you regain your freedom, you will immediately restrict our own freedom, making sure that we do not get a second chance in turning the tables against you." "I won't," Queen Rhiannon promised. "I will no longer antagonize any of you, and I'll allow all of you to return to your world." "I wasn't born yesterday, Your Majesty," Lux said while lightly pinching the pink tip of Kai's right breast, making Queen Rhiannon's body stiffen. "We are too weak to fight you. The only time I can win against you is now. However, it's not like we can't reach a compromise." The half-elf loosened his grip on Kai's body and asked her to face him. Queen Rhiannon did as she was told and turned around, making sure that the half-elf's member slipped out of her body. She then glared at the red-headed teenager, who was looking at her in the eyes with a calm expression on his face. "What compromise?" Queen Rhiannon asked. "As long as it doesn't go below my bottom line, I am willing to agree to your condition." "Before we talk, can you put my little brother inside you again?" Lux asked in a teasing tone. He missed Kai so much that he wanted to be inside her as much as possible. The corner of Queen Rhiannon's lips twitched after hearing the half-elf's words. His member had already been inside her for an entire 6 hours, and he still wanted to stick it in while his fiancée's body was still recovering? "Are you an animal?" Queen Rhiannon asked. "Is that all you can think of?" "Well, we won't start our negotiation until you meet that condition first," Lux insisted. "It's up to you whether you want to compromise or not." The succubus queen knew that Lux was just messing with her and doing his best to humiliate her. However, since she had no other choice but to seek a compromise, she decided to endure it for the time being. Holding the hot and hard shaft in her hand, she slowly slid it inside her body, while giving the half-elf the "Are you happy?" glare. Lux smiled and nodded his head. "This is a good start," Lux stated. "Your act alone proved that you are willing to compromise with me." "Enough!" Queen Rhiannon snapped. "What is your condition?" Lux knew that the succubus queen had already reached the limit of her patience, so he no longer teased her and went straight to the point. "There are 3 conditions that you need to meet in order for you to be released," Lux said. "The first one is for you to cooperate with me and allow me to become a seer anchor. Do not think for a moment that I am unaware of your original plan to absorb my strength until my rank regressed to that of an ordinary mortal. I am merely doing what you initially planned to do, so you can't blame me for my actions. Although I feel sorry that you will lose a bit of your strength, this is the price you have to pay for losing against us." Queen Rhiannon frowned, but she didn't deny Lux's accusation. She had indeed planned to drain his strength and transfer his stats to Kai. The moment Lux's rank regressed to that of an ordinary mortal, she would use him as a hostage to force Kai to accept her offer in becoming a succubus, corrupting the high priestess and making her one of her loyal subordinates. "What is the second condition?" Queen Rhiannon asked. "The second condition is a bit harsh, but it is needed to ensure that you will not go back on your words and try to hurt us," Lux replied. The second condition is that you should give me your true name. Queen Rhiannon's eyes widened in shock after hearing Lux's second condition. She could still agree to let the half-elf drain some of her stats and allow him to become a C ranker, but giving her true name is akin to giving the half-elf the power to command her, similar to that of a slave. Just as Lux expected, the succubus queen's eyes became murderous as she rested her hands on the half-elf's shoulder, digging her nails into his skin. If she could muster even a tenth of her previous strength, she would immediately gouge the half-elf's eyes, which were looking at her with a challenging gaze. Queen Rhiannon's gaze was enough to tell Lux that what he was asking was something that was very hard to achieve. Even so, he didn't back down and stated his third condition. After giving me your name, I will give you a set of orders that will prevent you from harming us in any way possible. As long as you can do that, Kai will release you. The one who thought of these conditions wasn't Lux, but Kai herself. After giving her chastity to Lux, she was able to communicate to him telepathically as long as they were within 2,000 meters of each other. The half-elf thought that these conditions were good, so he decided to use these as the foundation of the compromise that he planned to offer Queen Rhiannon. Suddenly and without warning, Queen Rhiannon dug her teeth into Lux's neck, biting it with everything she had. However, no matter how hard she bit his neck, her teeth couldn't dig enough to draw blood, and she even felt like she was biting against something very hard. What she didn't know was that Lux could make his skin as hard as dragon scales. He already knew that Queen Rhiannon would attack him in some form, so he had already made preparations in advance. But even if he didn't do this, the most that Queen Rhiannon could leave on his body was a kiss mark that would disappear after a few minutes. Since that was the case, Lux allowed her to vent her frustrations until her jaws started to ache. Those are the only conditions we have for you, Lux stated while Queen Rhiannon was still biting his neck repeatedly like a fawnless vampire. I understand that this isn't fair, but this is the only way to ensure that you will not go back on your word. A few minutes later, Queen Rhiannon stopped biting Lux and started slapping him until her hands turned red. When the half-elf deemed that Kai's body would only be hurt if this continued, he knocked her unconscious before holding his fiancée's body close to him, allowing the water of the pool to recover the injuries she had inflicted on herself. Queen Rhiannon didn't know how many hours had passed, but the next time she opened her eyes, she found herself lying on her own bed with the half-elf lying beside her. "You're finally awake," Lux said. "So, how about it? Will you consider my offer?" "Just kill me," Queen Rhiannon shouted hatefully. "Kill me. I'd rather die than become your plaything." "But you don't want to die, right?" Lux replied. "You have suffered for many years in order to stand tall in the abyssal world. Are you sure you want to throw that all away?" Queen Rhiannon's eyes widened in shock after hearing Lux's words. "I'm sorry." Kai's words resonated inside Queen Rhiannon's head. "I was desperate to find any weakness that we can use over you. Because of that, I peeked into your memories while you are unconscious." Queen Rhiannon could only endure in silence as she bit her lip, causing it to bleed. Lux continued to hug her and used the skill, Healing Wind, in order to heal the injury that Queen Rhiannon had inflicted on Kai's body. While this was happening, Queen Rhiannon closed her eyes and willed herself to go to Kai's sea of consciousness, where the owner of the body resided. There, she found Kai, sitting on a chair while patting the head of a baby golden slime, whom she had snuck inside her body during the battle against the satyr. Since Fei Fei was not as courageous as Eiko when it came to fighting, Kai used her connection with her beast companion to put her somewhere safe from harm, which was her spiritual world. This was also where Iris kept her guardians whenever she was going to Elysium to fight a boss or conquer a dungeon. "I'm sorry." Kai apologized for the second time after seeing the succubus queen's hateful glare in her direction. "How much did you see?" Queen Rhiannon asked through gritted teeth. "Everything," Kai replied. "I saw everything. Because of this, I can no longer see you as an enemy. After all, both of us are the same. We both have the celestial maiden physique." "We're not the same," Queen Rhiannon shouted. "What do you know? You have lived a very peaceful life, surrounded by family and friends. I wasn't as lucky as you. The first man I loved used me as a tool in order to increase his rank. After he stepped into the calamity rank, he tossed me aside like a dirty rag that no longer had any value. For many years, I wandered the abyss, fighting for survival every single day. I lived a hellish life, and you tell me we are the same? Screw you. Queen Rhiannon hatefully summoned a giant fireball and threw it at Kai. However, the high priestess only raised his hand, and the giant fireball disappeared without a trace. What you say is true, Kai replied. It was arrogant of me to say that we are the same. Unlike you, I grew up in a loving family protected by my tribesmen. If anyone tried to harm me, my grandfather would immediately go on a rampage and start killing people. You, on the other hand, had to resort to tricks and schemes to steadily raise your rank in places far away from those that will harm you. However, even that didn't last long, because the one whom you had given your love and trust came back for you in order to use you as a tool for the second time. Queen Rhiannon's body trembled as she recalled the hateful demon who had gone to great lengths to find her when he realized that he needed her to become a demigod. Fortunately, the golem of destruction was passing through on that day, and out of whim, saved Queen Rhiannon from a horrible fate. Hundreds of years passed, and Queen Rhiannon also became a calamity-ranked abyssal creature. The first thing she did when she gained her rank was to hunt down her traitorous first love and kill him with her own hands. However, his death wasn't simple. Queen Rhiannon absorbed his essence and added it to her own, allowing her to break through and become a demigod. After that, she took over his territory, which was the 13th layer of the abyss, and became its new overlord. Kai looked at the succubus queen with a pitiful gaze because she knew how much Queen Rhiannon had suffered. She also understood the real reason why the succubus queen tried to corrupt her by letting her absorb Lux's rank and recover her strength. Queen Rhiannon had long lost her trust in men and treated them as mere tools to satisfy the cravings of her body. She wanted Kai to not suffer the same heartbreak as she did. So she took matters in her own hands and laid out the foundations in order to convert the high priestess into a succubus. Queen Rhiannon intended Kai to be like her, someone who would take the strength of others and add it to her own, instead of letting others absorb her strength until she became nothing but an empty shell. In Queen Rhiannon's eyes, she was merely helping someone who had the same body constitution as her. Even if the methods she used were something that the high priestess of the Rowan tribe couldn't accept, she believed that after a few hundred years had passed, Kai would thank her for opening her eyes to the truth. The truth that men couldn't be trusted and that they would only use her as a tool for their own gains. This was why the moment she saw Lux, Queen Rhiannon decided to capture him alive at all cost and let Kai personally kill him, thinking that it would make her lose her heart and embrace a new destiny. A new destiny that would make her another powerhouse in the abyss and become Queen Rhiannon's trusted companion for life. As a high priestess, Kai had developed a skill that would allow spirits to possess her for short periods of time when she was still very young. This allowed her to harness their powers and use it to defend herself or to attack others in self-defense. Through the years, she had mastered this ability, allowing her to retain the spirits inside her for a long time that could last for several days up to several weeks. When Queen Rhiannon possessed her in the hope to corrupt and control her body from within, the former didn't know this. She only succeeded to possess Kai in the beginning because the former allowed her to succeed. Kai was certain that Lux would come to her rescue, so she confidently laid out the foundation of her trap that would prevent the succubus queen from escaping once she possessed her body. Since she had given her chastity to Lux, she had imparted a mark in his body, which allowed her unique body constitution to synchronize with him every time they made love with each other. Through this connection, Kai was able to break free from Queen Rhiannon's control and trap the demigod inside her body, allowing them room for negotiations. Queen Rhiannon, who was still possessing Kai's body, laid on the bed as the half-elf's essence spurted inside of her. Throughout their lovemaking session, the succubus queen just laid there without moving and simply allowed Lux to do whatever he wanted with her body, draining her strength in the process. Her outburst in Kai's spiritual world drained her emotionally, and she no longer cared what they did to her. Queen Rhiannon knew that Kai couldn't keep her trapped inside her body forever, So the succubus queen was merely waiting for that time limit to expire. Once that happens, she would have her revenge and pay Lux back tenfold for everything that happened to her. As for Kai, she still intended to turn her into a succubus, regardless of her will. The succubus queen was a very patient person, especially after everything that she had gone through. Knowing that she would have the last laugh, she decided to endure everything until Kai reached her limit. As for Lux, although he was able to increase his rank drastically, the half-elf was only halfway through his breakthrough to become a C ranker. He had to take several breaks in order to let Kai's body recover, aware that doing it too much would harm her in the long run. His fiancée had also shared what had happened between her and Queen Rhiannon inside her spiritual world and asked Lux to help convince the demigod to settle for a compromise. I can understand that she hated the condition of revealing her true name, Lux thought. But if we can't get her true name, any negotiations we make with her will have no binding power whatsoever. Kai had also told the half-elf that at most, she would only be able to trap Queen Rhiannon inside her body for a week. After that, the succubus queen would be able to break free. When that happened, it will be their turn to suffer her wrath. 2 days had already passed since Lux and Kai were able to turn the tables against the demigod. This meant that they only had 5 more days in order to find a way to convince her to compromise. While Lux was thinking about what they should do, he gently carried Queen Rhiannon off the bed and walked towards her private pool, which had restorative properties. Although Lux could heal her injuries using healing wind, he was unable to restore her stamina. Because of this, he would take her to the pool after every 10 rounds to rest for half an hour. The pool also allowed Lux to recover his stamina, which was like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. Is there really no way for us to meet halfway? Lux asked the succubus queen as he gently cleaned her body with his hand. My true name is non-negotiable, Queen Rhiannon replied. I will not agree to any compromise if it involves giving you my true name. The half-elf sighed in his heart because they were once again back to square one. An hour later, while the two of them were still resting, someone barged inside the room, taking Lux and Queen Rhiannon by surprise. Your Majesty, it's terrible! One of the succubus of the Passion Palace shouted as soon as she entered the room. Your Majesty, where are you? Hearing the urgency in the succubus voice, Queen Rhiannon felt that something was terribly wrong. I am here, Queen Rhiannon replied. What's wrong? Since Lux was holding her firmly in his embrace, the succubus queen had no choice but to call out her subordinate to her. A second later, the room of the pool area opened, and an anxious-looking succubus entered. Forgive my intrusion, Your Majesty, the succubus stated. I know that you are still toying with these mortals, but I bring dire news. Andres, the demon lord of the 12th layer, is gathering his massive army to attack. What? Queen Rhiannon shouted. Where is he going to attack? Who is he going to attack? Your Majesty, you already know that there are only 2 possible targets for this invasion. The succubus replied with a grim look on her beautiful face. Either he attacks the 11th layer, or he attacks the 13th layer. As far as I know, Orius, who ruled the 11th layer, is still as formidable as ever. His army is also very competent, especially after his latest skirmish against the abyssal lord of the 10th layer, Andrealphus. Although we think that he might be intending to attack the 11th layer while they are still recovering from the war, the possibility of him attacking the 13th layer is still higher. Queen Rhiannon hatefully gritted her teeth after hearing her subordinate's report. That warmongering bastard Andres. Does he think of me as a weakling? Queen Rhiannon gnashed her teeth in anger. Does he really intend to attack the 13th layer? This wasn't the first time that Queen Rhiannon had fought against Andres. Their latest battle happened 50 years ago, and it ended with Andres retreating in defeat. That was also the time when Queen Rhiannon had made a name for herself, and everyone recognized her strength as an abyssal lord of the 13th layer. Did he perhaps increase his strength in a span of a few decades? Queen Rhiannon frowned. She knew that Andres would only attack if he was certain that he had a chance of winning. Your Majesty, what should we do? The succubus asked. According to our agents in the 12th layer, it will only take Andres 3 days to gather and arm his 30 demonic legions before they set forth to wage war. If he really decides to invade the 13th layer then, The lips of the succubus trembled because this was the worst-case scenario. Although their queen was indeed very powerful and stronger than Andres, they didn't have an army that could fight against his demonic legions. When two demigods fought, they would definitely prevent each other from targeting each other's army. This would allow their subordinates to move, and whoever had the stronger army would eventually win in the end. Unless Queen Rhiannon could drastically overpower Andres and prevent his forces from invading the 13th layer, the chances of the 13th layer winning were slim. Each layer of the abyss held a very special abyssal core. This abyssal core granted authority to the abyssal lord, giving him complete dominion over the layer of the abyss. Once the ownership of this abyssal core changed, the new master of the land would gain a great boost in their strength, allowing them to become more powerful than they already were. Send word to the satyrs and gather everyone in the main hall. Queen Rhiannon, I will meet all of you in 3 hours. Yes, your majesty. The succubus hurriedly left the room to carry out her queen's orders. Lux, who had heard everything from start to finish, suddenly felt Kai's body tremble. It was as if Queen Rhiannon was fighting a great internal battle with herself. A battle that would decide her fate, as well as the fate of her subordinates who trusted her with their lives. Kai's body didn't stop trembling until 5 minutes later. When it stopped, Queen Rhiannon faced Lux with a determined look on her face. I am willing to accept your condition, but I will also give my conditions as well, Queen Rhiannon stated. The conditions I'll give you are non-negotiable. If you don't agree to them, then all of us will die. Lux knew that this was a turning point, so he decided to nod his head and listen to the conditions that Queen Rhiannon was going to add to their agreement. I will allow you to drain my strength and help you become a C ranker, Queen Rhiannon stated. In return, you will help me fight against Andres and his demonic legions. The second condition is that after you finish commanding me to agree to your conditions using my true name, you and Kai will completely forget about it. What I'm talking about is that this information will be erased from your memory completely, not leaving any trace behind. Queen Rhiannon paused for a bit before telling Lux her last condition. Last but not the least, you will give me one of those white marbles as an insurance, Queen Rhiannon stated. Just in case Andres succeeds in defeating our forces. I don't want my sisters to fight. Even though they are capable of fighting, I don't want any of them to die. Just like me, they have suffered a lot of hardships in the abyss. If there are people who will fight this battle, it will just be you and me. If there is really no hope in winning, I will immediately use the white marble to escape the abyss, alongside you, Kai, your people, and my sisters. Here in the abyss, only slavery and death awaits the losers. I don't intend to become a slave to anyone ever again. If you are worried that I will wreak havoc in your world, you can add a condition that I'm not allowed to attack any of your people, unless it is for self-defense. That should be enough, right? Lux didn't agree right away and consulted with Kai about Queen Rhiannon's proposal. A minute later, both of them agreed that as long as they were able to clearly state their commands to her while invoking her true name, Queen Rhiannon would not be able to break their agreement. Very well, Lux said. We agree to your conditions. Understood. Queen Rhiannon nodded and closed her eyes. She returned to Kai's spiritual world so that she could give her true name to Kai. But before doing so, she initiated a soul contract that would bind Kai to only adhere to the conditions that they had agreed upon. If she were to add any other conditions while commanding Queen Rhiannon using her true name, the High Priestess soul would be destroyed, making her body a soulless husk. After carefully laying out the conditions in the soul contract, Queen Rhiannon took a deep breath before facing Lux with all the willpower she could muster. My true name is Rhiannon Regina Luxury. Queen Rhiannon's lips trembled as she cupped Lux's face. Please do not betray my trust. After saying her true name, Queen Rhiannon kissed Lux before Kai commanded her, using the authority she gained after knowing the name of the succubus queen that lorded over the 13th layer of the abyss. Lux accepted Queen Rhiannon's kiss and felt something warm and wet dripping to the side of his face. He didn't need to open his eyes because he already knew that the thing he felt were Queen Rhiannon's tears as she set aside her pride and dignity in order to save her people from the threat that loomed above their heads. When Kai finished commanding the succubus queen to adhere to their agreement, a ripple appeared inside her spiritual world, which also manifested in the real world. A moment later, the eye tattoo on Kai's forehead glowed brightly, and the succubus queen, who had been trapped inside the high priestess, once again materialized in the real world. Kai and Lux, who were still inside the pool, looked at the peerless beauty in a daze as Queen Rhiannon's true name disappeared from their memories. The succubus queen looked at her hands and clenched them tightly. It was as if she was getting a feel on how much strength she had lost after Lux started draining her strength, allowing him to increase his own. A minute later, she snapped her finger and instantly teleported Lux to her bedroom. Before the half-elf even knew what was happening, the peerless beauty was already pinning him down on the bed with a devilish smile on her face. "We don't have much time, so I'll take over and have you do it with me instead of your fiancé," Queen Rhiannon stated. "She's not the only one with the legacy of the Celestial Maiden. I also have this body constitution." Without another word, the succubus queen held Lux's member and kissed its head before putting it inside her soft and seductive lips. The half-elf's body shuddered as a wave of intense pleasure washed over his body. Right now, Queen Rhiannon was increasing his sensitivity, magnifying the pleasure that took over his senses. In just a span of a minute, the half-elf's body trembled as he reached his climax. The pleasure was simply too intense for him to endure, making him release his essence inside Queen Rhiannon's lips, who had no intention of wasting a single drop of his seed. The release was so strong and so powerful that it lasted for nearly half a minute, making Lux feel as if Queen Rhiannon had sucked his very soul out of his body. With a resounding pop, the succubus queen released Lux's member and licked her lips in a seductive manner. "You have to do better than that, boy," Queen Rhiannon said in a domineering tone. "You still have quite some way to go before you become a C ranker, so we won't be having any breaks till then. Don't worry about draining my stats, because I have a way for the two of us to increase our strength without harming each other's rank." The succubus queen smiled because Lux's defeated expression tickled her sadistic tendencies. "You don't have to do anything else except keep this thing standing," Queen Rhiannon stated as she gripped Lux's member. "You can do that, can't you?" Lux gritted his teeth before nodding his head. He was like a soldier that was about to go to war for the first time and was determined to win no matter what it took. Soon, the half-elf would understand what a demigod succubus could do. Not only was Queen Rhiannon proficient in the arts of lovemaking, she also taught Lux many ways on how to pleasure a woman. Couldn't just stand idly on the side and join the two on the bed. With two ladies having the legacy of the Celestial Maiden working together to increase his rank, it only took Lux one more hour to finally make his breakthrough. "That was unbelievable," Lux muttered in exhaustion as his member released its last load inside Queen Rhiannon's body before finally going limp. The half-elf fell unconscious afterwards with a satisfied expression on his face. Kai lay down beside him and hugged her fiancé before also closing her eyes to rest. She had been physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted after everything she had been through. Lux had shared the stats that he absorbed with Kai, allowing her to once again become a ranker. Queen Rhiannon looked at the two sleeping lovers for a few seconds before turning around to leave the room. Now that she had done her part in increasing Lux's rank into a C ranker, it was now time for her to gather her forces in preparation for the war that was about to come. The day after Lux became a C ranker, the half-elf went to check the other people who were captured by Queen Rhiannon and brought to the Passion Palace. "What did you say?" Lux asked Malcolm, whose head was currently resting on the lap of a mature beauty, who was lovingly caressing his naked chest. "You plan to stay here and fight for the war?" "Yes," Malcolm answered. "I decided to stay so that I could protect Julia, Piper, and Juniper. I won't let them get hurt." The three ladies in question were currently by Malcolm's side, with one giving him a lap pillow and the other two hugging him from the sides. The teenage boy was naked, and only a towel covered his member, which was recovering its strength for another round with the three ladies by his side. After experiencing the same thing as Malcolm, he had no words to say except "long live thighs." The half-elf also couldn't find fault in Malcolm's decision because he, too, was going to fight in the upcoming war between Abyssal Lords. Even so, Lux asked a second time to confirm whether the young man with dark blue hair was not under the influence of a charm ability and was truly going to fight for what he believed in. "Are you prepared to die here in the abyss?" Lux inquired. "Do you not want to go back to Elysium?" "Don't misunderstand me, Lux," Malcolm replied. "I will go back to Elysium, but only after this war ends. I'm sure that I'm going to regret it in the future if I run away from this battle." Lux was now sure that Malcolm wasn't under the influence of a charm spell and that the latter had made a decision with his own free will. Since that was the case, he no longer asked him anything and checked on Xander. Just like Malcolm, the young warrior from the Rowan tribe was but naked and currently sleeping peacefully in the embrace of a beautiful blonde succubus who looked like a young lady in her late teens. The succubus even placed a finger over her lips, signaling Lux not to wake the young man in her embrace. The half-elf nodded and went to talk to Alicia and Henrietta, who for some reason couldn't look him straight in the eye. Wow, I wonder why? What reason could there be? I don't know either. Really, it's definitely not, because she almost... "We don't plan to join this war," Alicia said. "Although I'm thankful to the succubus queen for extending her help when we were attacked by the satyrs. This battle is something that is way out of our league. Also, I still want to return to Elysium alive. There is still some unfinished business that I haven't dealt with back there." Lux knew that one of Alicia's unfinished business was her relationship with his stepfather, Alexander. Henrietta also didn't want to join the war, and the same could be said for the members of Serenity who had come along with her. Truth be told, Lux didn't want his allies from Elysium and Solais to fight in the upcoming war, and this was none of their business either. Knowing that Alicia and Henrietta felt the same, he felt relieved and decided to tell them about his plan before the war started. "The two of you, as well as those who don't want to fight, will return to Elysium with Kai tonight," Lux explained. "I and a few others will stay to help the succubus queen fight her opponents." "Why aren't you coming with us?" Henrietta asked with concern. "Surely, you do know that this isn't a battle that you should poke your nose in, right?" The purple-haired beauty subconsciously grabbed hold of Lux's arm and looked at him with a pleading gaze. "Please, just go back with us," Henrietta pleaded. "This is not our fight to begin with." Lux smiled and patted the hand that was holding onto him. "I'm sorry, but I made an agreement with Queen Rhiannon that I will fight in exchange for everyone's safe return back to Elysium," Lux said softly. "Don't worry, I don't intend to die here. Iris and Kai are waiting for me back home. I can't possibly leave my two beautiful fiancés behind now, can I?" Henrietta's lips trembled before she looked down. However, she still held on to Lux's arm, as if using it as a form of support to keep herself standing. Lux didn't pry her hand away and simply shifted his attention to Alicia. He knew that Henrietta truly cared for his safety, and this was something that warmed his heart. "When you return, please look for my master and tell him to return here in the abyss to back me up," Lux stated. "I know that even if I don't tell you to do this, he would still come here to save me. But in order to avoid any misunderstanding, tell him about the current situation between the succubus queen and her neighbors. That way, he would not attack Queen Rhiannon the moment he sees her. Just pass my message to him, and I believe he will know what to do next." The half-elf also thought of Aiko, who was currently with Iris back in Elysium. Knowing her personality, Lux was sure that the baby slime would not listen to reason and go to the abyss to save him with nuclear-level blast bombs. "Are you sure about this?" Alicia asked. "This is a battle that surpasses any of the battles that you have experienced in the past." "I know, but don't worry," Lux replied. "This is not the first time I've fought against abyssal creatures." During his stay with Zangrila, Lux and his subordinates had fought countless abyssal creatures and even stored their bodies inside their bounty rings. Truth be told, the half-elf hadn't experienced a proper war because all of the opponents he had faced so far were all more powerful than him. Because of this, he looked weak and useless in the eyes of others. So in this war, he wanted to test his mettle as he fought the lower-ranked fighters of the Abyssal Lord's army, while Queen Rhiannon kept their leader at bay. "Just promise me that you will go back alive, okay?" Henrietta spoke after a few minutes of silence. "Iris will be very sad if you die here. How about you? Lux asked in a teasing tone. Are you going to be sad if I die here as well? Yes, Henrietta replied. I will be sad, so don't die. Lux nodded and smiled at the purple-haired beauty, who was looking at him with determination. Understood. I won't die. All of you will be leaving tonight, so talk to the others who want to return as well. Queen Rhiannon had sent her subordinates to fetch the 6 rancors that she had bestowed to the satyrs a few days ago. Right now, those girls are being purified, removing all traces of the satyrs that had been left inside their bodies. Some of their memories were also altered, preventing them from experiencing any trauma when they returned to their respective kingdoms. Alicia and Henrietta sighed in relief because Lux might have tried to sugarcoat his words, but as women, they understood what he was trying to say. The essence of satyrs were very potent, and if they did it once with a woman, they were guaranteed to get pregnant. Knowing that these girls wouldn't have to suffer any hardships in their return put their minds at ease. Lux then bid goodbye to the 2 ladies who had almost lost their chastity to him if he didn't manage to resist Queen Rhiannon's petty tricks. Henrietta watched him go with a sad expression on her face. When she was under Queen Rhiannon's charm spell, she was unable to take control of her body. Even so, she was very aware of her surroundings. She remembered everything that she had done to Lux, which made it hard for her to look at him straight in the face. If I only met you sooner, Henrietta muttered. Alicia, who stood beside Henrietta, hugged the young lady and patted her head. She didn't know what would happen in the future, but she believed that the hurt that the young lady was feeling in her heart would be healed if given enough time. 3 hours before the return of those who didn't want to fight to Elysium. The sound of kissing reverberated inside the room as Kai and Lux shared passionate kisses with each other. This was very different from the time where they were making love just for the sake of increasing their ranks before the war started. Both of them had been through to a lot, and their relationship had only grown deeper after this incident. Lux and Kai only realized how much they truly cared for each other after entering the abyss for the first time in their lives. Knowing that her fiancé would be fighting a great battle, where his safety was not guaranteed, Kai felt the strong urge to make love to him to ease both of their hearts, as they would miss each other terribly. When their kiss ended, Kai stared at Lux lovingly before sliding his member inside of her. She didn't make any movement and simply stared at the handsome young man, whom she didn't expect would become her lifelong partner. You know, in the Rowan tribe, when the men are about to go to war or fight a battle where their safety hang in the balance, they will make love with their wives or lovers to leave their descendants behind, Kai said as she wrapped her arms around Lux's neck and stared at him intently. I wish I could have your child, Lux, but I have a feeling that you'll say that you have no intention of dying, so you won't grant my request. Even so, I can't help but feel anxious about the war. It will be a fight against demigods, and even if you are a sea ranker now, you are still an insignificant insect in their eyes. Also, the succubi won't be fighting in this war. There are only you and the others who decided to stay. Lux smiled and pressed his forehead on Kai's forehead. You want my child? Lux asked. Yes, Kai replied. Lux wrapped his arms around Kai's body, enjoying the feeling of her skin touching his own. I don't know why, but hearing you say that makes me very happy, Lux said. Although I believe that you, Iris, and I will eventually have kids together and become a family, I feel that it is still too early for that. Both of us still have things we need to do, and having a baby at the moment will prevent us from realizing our goals. Don't worry. I promise you that no matter what happens, I will return to you. Master will also be there, so if I really kick the bucket, I'm sure that he will think of something. Kai then pulled back her head before pounding Lux's chest repeatedly with her clenched fist. Not funny, Kai said. I want you alive. Iris will want you alive as well. I'm a necromancer, Lux commented. It will take more than killing me to kill me. Besides, the readers always say I have plot armor. Maybe that's true. Kai shook her head helplessly because she felt that Lux was just doing his best to assure her that everything is going to be okay. I'm serious, Kai stated. I want your baby, and I will give it to you after 2 or 3 years, Lux replied. Even the end of the world will not stop me from making you conceive with my child. I'm sure that my daughter will be as beautiful as you. And what if it's a boy? Kai inquired with amusement. What else? Lux winked. He will be just as handsome as me. The high priestess of the Rowan tribe wasn't able to stop the giggle that bubbled inside her chest. Lux's words were firm and carried a determination. It left Kai with no choice but to believe in him. Okay, Kai said softly. 2 to 3 years from now, I will conceive your child. Don't get cold feet when that time comes, okay? I won't, Lux said as he placed his hands on his fiancée's waist. Kai smiled and started to move her hips while wrapping her hands on the handsome teenager's neck, who promised to give her his child a few years from now. A few hours later, are all of you ready? Lux asked the people who were now about to return to Elysium. Yes, Alicia answered. But before we go, we're this, Lux. Alicia handed Lux a necklace that would allow them to see everything around him. Although they couldn't be with him in the war that was about to take place, they would be with him in spirit. Lux accepted the necklace and wore it. He then handed Alicia a white marble, which would take everyone back to Elysium. Don't forget to inform my master of the situation here, Alicia, Lux stated. I will need all the help I can get. I will, Alicia replied before hugging Lux. Be safe and don't die. Yes, ma'am. Lux returned Alicia's hug and let her go after a few seconds. After saying their final goodbyes, Lux and the others backed away, keeping a safe distance from the others who would return to Elysium. Kai waved at her fiancé, and Lux waved back at her. They had already told each other what they wanted to say when the two of them were making love with each other, so there was no need to say anything else. Let's go, Alicia announced before activating the white marble in her hand. Immediately, a black hole appeared above their heads and sucked all of them inside it almost instantly. Lux, Xander, Malcolm, and the rest of the men watched the ladies go from a safe distance. All of them had decided to stay and fight for reasons only known to them. A minute after Kai, Alicia, and Henrietta returned to Elysium, the satyrs led by Ampelos appeared in front of Lux and the others. I find it quite ironic that all of us will be fighting side by side in this war right after we fought each other, Ampelos said. Do you share the same feelings? Malcolm, Xander, and the rest of the men, with the exception of Lux, glared at the hateful satyr. They still hadn't forgotten what these monsters had done to them, and just seeing them made their hearts burn in anger. Ampelos wasn't fazed by the looks of hatred that the humans were giving him. Instead, he looked at the half-elf, whom he secretly admired after seeing his fight against the succubus queen back in the dark forest. I just want to ask you one thing, Ampelos stated. Do we have a chance to win? I don't know, Lux replied, but I have no intention of dying. Sounds good enough to me, Ampelos laughed. Just like Lux, he didn't know whether they could win the upcoming war. However, he also had no intention of dying, especially after meeting his father after not seeing each other for a century. He had so many questions to ask him, and he wanted to see him again. Ampelos believed that as long as Lux was in the abyss, his master, JAP, would come to find him and allow him to talk to his father once again.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.